Beneath the burning sands of Xinjiang, in a desert so vast it swallows sound, an archaeologist brushed away the dust of 4,000 years, only to find a face that should not exist. Pale skin, high cheekbones, strands of blonde hair preserved in the dry air of the Tarim Basin. It looked European. Yet this was no lost European traveller. This was a mummy buried long before Rome was even a dream. These bodies, now known as the Tarim mummies, lay in wooden coffins shaped like boats, their dead staring silently at the sky. Their wool cloaks, their leather boots, their felt hats, they told of a life both harsh and strangely familiar. When first studied, anthropologists called them Caucasoid, imagining an ancient migration from the west. But the desert had guarded a secret that would change everything. Modern genomic testing ripped apart the old story. Their DNA revealed a haunting truth. 72% ancient North Eurasian, 28% ancient Northeast Asian. Not European, not Chinese. A genetically isolated population, survivors of an Ice Age lineage thought long vanished. For over a millennium they lived cut off from the outside world, herding cattle and goats, drinking fermented milk, weaving woolen clothing, and burying their dead with sacred totems. They were both familiar and alien. Even their burial rituals whisper of a mystery. Women were laid to rest with wooden markers shaped like phalluses, men with cattle skulls, symbols of fertility, life and death, in a language no one alive remembers. Their faces, frozen in time, stare at us across 40 centuries. And yet, in the bustling markets of Kashgar today, in the music, in the call to prayer, in the Turkic language of the modern Uyghurs, there is no sign of this ancient desert tribe. So, here lies the first riddle of Uyghur DNA. If these mummies, with their blonde hair and ghostly eyes, were not the direct ancestors of the Uyghurs, if their genes are only fragments, echoes buried under layers of history, then who were the people that became the Uyghurs? And what ancient tide swept through this desert to erase one civilization, while giving birth to another? The desert wind carries that question across 4,000 years, and it leads us north into Xinjiang around 2000 BCE. Here, the land is alive with movement. Herds of cattle rumble across the steppe. Smoke rises from temporary camps along the Ili River valley. This is not the silence of the Tarim mummies. This is a crossroads, a world where cultures collide. Archaeologists call these the Chemachek and Andronovo cultures, and their fingerprints are everywhere. Bronze daggers lie buried beside warriors. Chariots with spoked wheels that will one day change the course of war rest in the soil. Wool fabrics and felt cloaks whisper of Western technologies carried across the mountains. Every artifact tells the same story. A Western steppe migration pushing east through the Altai Mountains and into the heart of Xinjiang. When geneticists studied the ancient remains from the Ili River Valley, they found something astonishing. A tripartite mixture, 3 worlds fused in blood, ancient North Eurasians, the same lineage haunting the Tarim mummies, steppe herders, likely the descendants of Yamnaya and Afanasyevo cultures, who had roamed from the Black Sea to the Altai, and Baikal hunter-gatherers, the wild gene flow from the Siberian forests to the northeast. This was not a single migration. It was a mosaic forming in real time, a human experiment in survival and exchange. And the land itself was the architect. Mountain corridors, desert oases and river valleys acted as channels, guiding people and their genes like water through stone. Here, in northern Xinjiang, isolation was impossible. Traders, nomads and herders would cross paths, share fire, share stories, and, inevitably, share blood. But in the south, In the silent oases of the Tarim Basin, the story was different. There, the ancient desert tribe, the ghost population with blonde hair and wooden boat coffins, still lived alone, untouched by these waves of change. They remained a world apart, even as the North became a living laboratory of cultural fusion. And so the mystery deepens. Yet, in the Tarim's southern oases, other people thrived, completely isolated. Their fate would rewrite the story of East and West. And then, the desert gave us a secret no historian was ready for. Beneath the endless sands of the Taklamakan Desert, where survival itself seems impossible, lies an oasis that defies all logic. It is here, at Shaohe Cemetery, that archaeologists uncovered a site so surreal it felt like stepping into a dream, or a nightmare. Hundreds of wooden posts rise from the sand like ghostly masts of a sunken fleet. Beneath them, coffins carved as boats lie buried in dry earth, as if these people believed a death was a journey across a vanished ocean. Inside, the bodies tell a story stranger than any legend. Women clutched cattle skulls to their chests, their faces turned toward the sun. Men were buried with carved wooden phalluses, symbols of life and fertility lost to time. Their woolen cloaks, leather boots, and felt hats are so perfectly preserved you can almost imagine them standing, alive in the wind. For decades, no one could explain it. Were these the lost Europeans, the mysterious Tocharians, or an unknown person entirely? Then came the genomic shock. The DNA ripped the mystery wide open. Male lineages, dominated by West Eurasian haplogroup OR1A1A. Female lineages, almost entirely East Asian. It was the fingerprint of a male-biased migration, a prehistoric collision of worlds thousands of years before the Silk Road ever existed. Steppe warriors had come from the far west and taken local women of the east, forming a ghost population, cut off from the world, isolated in this impossible desert. And here's the mind-breaking twist. Despite their isolation, their genes were a living map of Eurasia, carrying fragments of Europe, Siberia, and East Asia, yet belonging to no one. For over 1,000 years they survived unseen, as empires rose and fell far away. But one day, the silence broke. Across the dunes came footsteps of strangers, traders, herders, and nomads. The winds carried the first whispers of a road that would soon connect China to Rome. And with those whispers, the fate of the Shaohe people was sealed. The Silk Road had arrived. We travel now to the Iron Age, roughly 800 to 500 BCE, and the deserts of Xinjiang are no longer silent. Across the mountains and oases, invisible highways of survival were already forming. River valleys, caravan trails, and mountain passes that linked one hidden world to another. Hunters and herders led their flocks through narrow corridors, carrying not just goods, but bloodlines. Archaeologists dig into this era and find Scythian-style horse burials, horses laid to rest with ornate saddles and bronze cheek pieces, proof that nomads from the western steppes had arrived. Bactrian camels leave their bones in the sands, the perfect desert ships for a journey that never truly ended. In caves and temples, the faintest marks of Buddhist art begin to appear, carried west by wandering monks long before China's dynasties stamped their authority here. And the DNA, it tells an even more dramatic story. Iron Age genetic studies show that in some parts of Xinjiang, the genetic tide had shifted. Up to 80% of the ancestry in certain sites now came from Yellow River farmers, ancient East Asian lineages mingled with the enduring blood of steppe nomads. The oases were transforming into bridges between worlds, where local people and travelling clans left fragments of their identity in every generation. This was the Proto-Silk Road, a network of whispers, footsteps, and blood. No empire controlled it, no map recorded it. But it was already reshaping humanity in ways that no trader could see. Every horse, every camel, every marriage was a thread in the first great tapestry of Eurasia. And yet this was just the beginning. The desert had only tasted migration, because soon empires would rise, armies would march, caravans would grow into rivers of humanity. And when that happened, the genetic highway would explode, flooding Xinjiang with new lineages. And when it exploded, the desert was never the same. The quiet proto-Silk Road of the Iron Age gave way to a roaring current of people by the first millennium AD. The sands of Xinjiang, once silent, now pulsed with life. Saka horsemen racing along the river valleys, Xiongnu raiders emerging from the northern steppes, and Han envoys riding through mountain passes with bolts of silk. It was not yet an empire's road, but a living chain of migrations and exchanges. In this era, Turfan and Kocho rose from the desert like mirages, turning into human laboratories of blood and culture. Archaeologists have uncovered multi-layered cemeteries. Here, graves of soldiers, merchants and farmers who never shared a language, but whose descendants carried their DNA. Genetic studies show the story written in bone. West Eurasian Y chromosomes dominate, R1A, J2 and others, while maternal lines remain largely East Asian, the daughters of local oases who wove these outsiders into their world. This is the heartbeat of sex-biased migration carved into Uyghur ancestry. And then the first great identity shift arrived. 744 AD, the birth of the Uyghur Khaganate in Mongolia, a nomadic empire of the steppe, powerful, wealthy and feared. Their banners flew high for less than a century, before the Kyrgyz invasion of 840 AD shattered it. Entire clans abandoned their ancestral homeland, pushing south into the Tarim Basin. With them came more than swords. They brought new lineages, new tongues and new memories, which bled into the oases of Kashgar, Khotan and Turfan, fusing with the genetic mosaic already there. Picture those cities now, Buddhist murals glowing in torchlight, Manichaean priests whispering prayers, Persian merchants selling beads beside Chinese envoys. Each caravan that stopped in these markets left traces of itself, sometimes in trade, sometimes in love, and always in genes. By the time the first millennium ended, the Uyghur genome was no single origin story. It was a living diary of migrations and collisions. But all of this was just the calm before the storm, because beyond the horizon an empire of riders was gathering, one that would burn cities, crush kingdoms, and redraw the Uyghur genome in a single generation. Then one empire would change the Uyghur DNA forever, the empire of the horse. And that empire came thundering out of the east like a storm that could swallow the sky. The 13th century was the age of the Mongols, and nothing in Eurasia would ever be the same. To most of the world, the Mongol armies meant terror. Cities burned, kingdoms shattered, and entire cultures erased. But to the hidden deserts of Xinjiang, they brought something even stranger. They brought a tidal wave of blood. When geneticists mapped the modern Uyghur genome, they discovered a massive admixture pulse around 27 to 30 generations ago, right in the era of the Mongol and Yuan dynasties. It was as if the land itself had recorded the invasion, not in ruins or ashes, but in DNA. Imagine the scene. Mongol cavalry thundering into the Tarim Basin, banners snapping in the wind. Behind them, Persian artisans and merchants followed the caravan roads, while Central Asian traders and Silk Road pilgrims poured into oasis towns like Kashgar, Khotan and Turfan. Within a single century, the oases became genetic melting pots, unlike anything the region had seen before. East and West fused in the blood of one generation. Excavations and historical records show the visual contrast perfectly. Persian textiles hang in Buddhist cave temples, like those at Kizil, while steppe warriors ride past, markets selling Chinese silk and Mediterranean glass. The Uyghur ancestors became witnesses to a collision of worlds, and their very DNA absorbed the chaos of empire. But here is the mind-breaking twist. Despite the Mongols rewriting the region's genetic map, modern Uyghurs still carry a fingerprint from over 4,000 years ago, a ghost signal that leads back to the mysterious desert mummies of the Tarim Basin. Through every conquest, every migration, and every empire that tried to erase the past, the oldest blood in the desert refused to vanish. And that single stubborn fragment of DNA will unlock the next chapter in the Uyghur story, where the ghosts of the Tarim still walk among the living. Even today, they are still here. Hidden in the blood of modern Uyghurs is a whisper from 4,000 years ago, a fragment of ancient North Eurasian DNA that refuses to die. Geneticists studying Uyghur genomes expected to find the fingerprints of empires, the Mongols, Persians, Turkic tribes. But what stunned them was the survival of the desert ghosts, the isolated lineage of the Tarim mummies. Through conquest, migration, and the rise and fall of kingdoms, a piece of that first people endures. Genome-wide studies have revealed something astonishing. Uyghurs today are among the most genetically diverse populations on Earth. Their ancestry is a four-way tapestry, woven from East Asian, West Eurasian, Siberian, and South Asian lineages. It is as if the entire history of the Silk Road is etched into their very cells. Each strand of DNA is a story of survival, a memory of someone who crossed a mountain pass, walked a desert trail, or defended an oasis long before the modern world even existed. And you can see this history in the faces of Uyghurs today. In the bustling markets of Kashgar, you might meet a child with pale eyes and high cheekbones, carrying the echoes of steppe nomads. In Hotan, a woman with almond eyes and black hair reflects the blood of ancient East Asian farmers. The Uyghur identity is not singular. It is a living map of the Silk Road, a bridge between worlds that never stopped moving. But this living map comes with a question that science is only beginning to untangle. Genetic studies show striking differences from town to town. In some oases, the people look and test genetically more European, echoes of steppe migrations and Persian merchants. In others, East Asian ancestry dominates, a reflection of ancient farmers and Silk Road settlers. The ghost of the Tarim lives on, but it does not live evenly. Why do some Uyghur towns look genetically more European, while others lean East Asian? The answer lies in a map that doesn't exist on paper, but in blood. When scientists broke down the DNA of Uyghur populations across Xinjiang, they found something extraordinary, a hidden map of ancestry carved into the land itself. In the north, across the windswept plains of Dzungaria, the genetic signal leans heavily East Asian. Faces here reflect the steppe nomads and ancient farmers who flowed in from the east, shaped by centuries of migration along mountain corridors. But in the south, deep in the Tarim Basin, the picture changes. The desert oases, Khotan, Chechen, Nia, carry a stronger West Eurasian signature, echoes of Bronze Age migrants, Saka horsemen, and Persian traders who once ruled the desert routes. It is as if the Tarim itself is a time capsule, keeping the whispers of the steppe alive while the northern plains move on. Geneticists dug deeper and found mutation clusters, tiny signatures that tell micro-histories of survival and intermarriage. cytochrome B variations in mitochondrial DNA mark maternal lines tracing back to East Asian and Siberian ancestors. R1. AY chromosomes speak of steppe warriors riding in from the far west, leaving sons in the sand. C haplogroups hint at waves of nomads who crossed the mountains from the east, weaving their blood into the tapestry of the Uyghur story. The result is a people who are not of a single origin but a spectrum, a living gradient of history. Walk from one oasis to the next, and you are walking across 4,000 years of migration frozen in place. In the north, the winds carry the memory of the Mongols and Xiongnu. In the south, the sands still whisper of the Tarim mummies and their steppe fathers. And this is where the real mystery begins. Because if the DNA preserves the entire story, every migration, every conquest, every marriage, then why does history remember it differently? Whose voices survived, and whose were buried beneath the dunes? Yet, the greatest mystery of all is not in the DNA, but in how history remembers it. And that is where the story turns. For centuries, the history of the Uyghurs has been rewritten and reshaped, not by the people themselves, but by the empires that ruled over them. Tang chroniclers, Mongol records and Qing dynasty archives all painted their own picture, sometimes as allies, sometimes as rebels, and often as strangers in their own land. Borders shifted, cities fell, and yet the people of the Tarim carried on, leaving their true story not in books, but in blood. Modern archaeogenomics has shattered the old myths. For generations, history tried to claim that there must be one origin, one lineage, one culture to explain the Uyghurs. But the genomes say otherwise. No single lineage owns the Tarim Basin. It has always been a continuum of migrations and collisions, from the ghost population of Shaohe, with their boat-shaped coffins, to the steppe warriors of R1A, to the Mongol riders who flooded the oases, and the Silk Road merchants who brought new blood from as far as Rome and India. Each wave left a mark. Look closely at the Uyghur genome, and you see a 4,000-year diary of survival. A living memory of diversity, not purity. Each face in Kashgar's market or Turfan's old city is a mirror of resilience, a human bridge between the East and the West, the past and the present. But here is the mind-breaking twist: DNA can preserve the memories that history tried to erase. It tells us that while kingdoms rose and fell, while myths were written and rewritten, the blood kept the truth alive. And if this much was hidden in the Uyghurs, how much more lies buried in the deserts, the mountains, the forgotten graves of the Silk Road? Because there is one question we cannot escape. How many other Silk Road peoples are hiding similar ghost ancestries, waiting to be found? The answer is still unfolding. Stand in the Kashgar Bazaar today and you feel it, a hum of history beneath the noise of traders and the scent of spices. 1,000 faces, 1,000 stories, each one carrying fragments of journeys that began long before the world we know. The Uyghurs are not just a people. They are a mirror of Eurasia itself. Every migration, every empire, every forgotten tribe has left a brushstroke on this living portrait. Across the Tarim Basin, the desert keeps its own memory. Boat-shaped coffins lie buried in Shaohe's sands. Buddhist caves in Kizil hold the colours of India and Persia side by side. And in the dust of abandoned Silk Road towns, the wind still moves over bones that carry lineages older than history books admit. The story of the Uyghurs is not a straight line, it is a spiral, reaching back 4,000 years, yet still turning with every new discovery. And then there is the DNA, our last great storyteller. Each genome sequenced from an ancient skeleton writes a new chapter in silence. It reveals connections we never imagined. Steppe nomads meeting Chinese farmers, Persian merchants marrying desert daughters, Mongol riders leaving a genetic storm in their wake. The Silk Road was never finished, because it is still alive in the blood of its descendants. But one question lingers, echoing like a whisper in the mountains and dunes. If the Uyghur story hides this much, what else have we missed? What other lost peoples of the Silk Road are waiting to speak again? Through the dust, through the bones, through the code of life itself. And on our next journey, we will follow that whisper. From the Scythians to the Tocharians, we will seek the faces and voices that history forgot, because the desert is never truly silent. What other forgotten peoples still whisper through our DNA?